It has been over 200 years since the double-slit experiment of light brought the wave-particle duality of light to the forefront of quantum physics. And yet, to this day, there is no theory or hypothesis that clearly explains what occurred in that experiment. But that's not all. There's also the astonishing similarity between the distribution of atomic energy levels and the 0 points of the Riemann Zeta Function. Physicists still view this with wonder, but not a single one has been able to explain it clearly. Even Richard Feynman, one of the greatest minds of his time, famously said, "No one understands quantum mechanics." So what do you think is the root of all this confusion? Science is not magic. In nature, there is no result without a cause. The quantum world operates by principles, completely different from those in the visible physical world. If you do not understand this principle, you will never be able to solve the mysteries of quantum mechanics. Can you find a coin in a room where no coin exists? It was with the intent to share this principle of the quantum world with the world that I created this video. If this video were a clickbait piece made for profit, then may I and my descendants be cursed for generations. This video clearly explains both the phenomena of the light double-slit experiment and the prime number characteristics of atomic energy levels. And beyond that, it will show you clearly how the three-dimensional material world and the universe are formed and operate.
1. Three-dimensional space is digital, and it must be digital. 2. The distinction between particles, existence and empty space, non-existence. 3. The astonishing method of movement that occurs only in the quantum world. 4. The true nature of the double-slit experiment of light, and is light a particle or a wave? 5. The birth of matter elements and the surprising role of prime numbers. 6. What is mass? And why is energy proportional to mass? E equals mc squared in gravity. 7. What is the mass of light? And why is the speed of light always constant? 8. On the new type of spacecraft UFO humanity must develop in the future.
A hypothesis is not proof. However, if a hypothesis can clearly explain the results or phenomena of an experiment, then it should be treated not as a hypothesis, but as a theory, especially in the field of quantum mechanics, where things cannot be directly seen. There is only one thing I ask of you. Please watch this video without any prejudice or preconceived notion, such as, there's no way that a problem, which the world's greatest scholars couldn't solve for over 200 years, could have been solved by an unknown person from Korea, a small country in Asia. Miracles can happen anywhere, at any time.
1. Three-dimensional space is digital, and it must be digital.
I first became inspired by the idea of digital space when I encountered Planck's constant in the electron jump. Later, upon learning from Einstein's theory of relativity that the path of light bends near a gravitational field, I was able to develop my hypothesis of digital space. Initially, I intended to explain digital space using these concepts, but the video became too long, so I decided to omit that portion in this version. However, if you watch this video to the end, you will clearly understand why space is digital and why it must be, especially after seeing the 4th section, the true nature of the double-slit experiment of light, and the 5th section, the birth of matter elements and the surprising role of prime numbers. You will understand why countless brilliant physicists have failed to explain the phenomena of quantum mechanics for over 200 years. If a world-renowned physicist had proposed the theories I present here, you would likely cheer and enthusiastically support them. But remember 500 years ago, the foolish, collective intelligence that supported the geocentric model also included the top scientists of the time. Scientific theory is not an election for president. From now on, humanity must abandon the idea that the empty space in the universe contains nothing. Something that contains nothing cannot have structure or function. Please keep this in mind. Researching quantum mechanics without accepting digital space is no different from trying to research astronomy while denying the heliocentric model.
2. The distinction between particles, existence and empty space, non-existence.
So then what is the difference? What distinguishes the countless digital elements of three-dimensional space between particles and the empty space of the universe? It is the difference between vibrating strings and non-vibrating strings. The vibrating strings are the unit vibrating strings we distinguish as particles' existence, while the remaining non-vibrating strings make up the vast majority of empty space in 3 dimensions. Particles are not tiny bits of matter that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Particles are vibration, and vibration is energy. The beginning of vibration is the birth of particles. The detailed explanation of how vibration begins will be covered in another video.
3. The astonishing method of movement that occurs only in the quantum world.
Now, I would like to ask you a very fundamental and important question. If vibrating strings are particles' existence and non-vibrating strings are empty space, then in this quantum world, when a particle, a vibrating string, moves forward, does it push aside the non-vibrating strings in front of it, forcing its way through space? Or does it transfer its own vibration to the empty strings ahead? In the quantum world, movement occurs in a way that is completely absent from the visible physical world. It is precisely this kind of movement that explains the bizarre outcome of the double-slit experiment of light. In the quantum world, movement does not mean changing the position of a digital vibrating string. It means the transfer of vibration. In other words, movement is the transmission of energy. Isn't it fascinating and remarkable that even existence itself is vibration, and its movement is also a transmission of vibration? For this reason, it seems that natural religions like Hinduism and Buddhism have long described the beginning of the universe and of existence in terms of emptiness and vibration.
4. Is light a particle or a wave? Revealing the true nature of the double-slit experiment of light.
As light travels through a space made of digital, non-vibrating strings, its vibration is distributed to neighboring points within a 90-degree range on either side, according to force vector probability. And naturally, this kind of vibrational transmission follows a straight-line priority, which is easy to grasp intuitively. Here, straight line refers to digital points that are geometrically closest to a true straight path. When experimental light moves forward while surrounding light is blocked, its vibration is transmitted to digital strings within a forward-facing 90-degree spread based on force vector probability. This is what we refer to as the wave theory of light. However, when we shine an observational light to observe this movement, the straight-line priority of the observational light begins to influence the lateral neighboring points. As a result, the lateral vibration transmission of the experimental light, governed by vector probability, no longer occurs, and vibration is passed only along the straight-line points. This is what we call the particle theory of light. More experiments are needed to determine the extent to which the intensity of the observational light affects the vector probability of the experimental light. This is precisely why the nonsensical metaphor of Schrödinger's cat emerged from the double-slit experiment.
5. The birth of matter elements and the astonishing role of prime numbers.
Now we enter one of the most important sections of quantum mechanics. Aside from unit vibrating strings like light and electrons, how are the actual elements that form matter created? It is through the combination of unit vibrating strings. To be more precise, these combinations of unit vibrating strings become the fundamental elements of matter. And here's the astonishing part. The frequencies of these strings play a role in the combination. Vibration means change, and change is energy. The binding force of these combinations is different from gravity. To break apart such bonded elements, a large amount of energy is required depending on their frequencies. Even more surprising is the fact that these combinations occur only with frequencies that are prime numbers. However, for some unknown reason, vibrating strings that have divisors such as even-numbered frequencies seem to interfere with each other during strong bonding. This may be due to the ease of synchronization among multiples. The exact mechanism behind this interference still requires further research. And there is compelling evidence that these combinations happen only with prime-numbered frequencies. It lies in the astonishingly perfect match between the formula that gives the probability of an energy gap of RER between two particles and the formula that gives the probability of a spacing U between zeros of the Riemann Zeta Function. Of course, I originally drew inspiration for the prime frequency hypothesis from these two formulas, but if the alignment is this perfect, isn't that more than just inspiration? Isn't this a solid indication that the frequencies that bind the strings forming elements must be prime numbers? And this fact is also evidence that our three-dimensional world is made of digital structure. Can you honestly call the perfect match between the two equations a coincidence? More importantly, I believe that highly rare elements, made of high prime frequency combinations ones, we haven't yet discovered may exist on other planets, like in the movie Avatar. And I truly wonder what kind of properties those materials might have.
6. What is mass, and why is energy proportional to mass? E equals mc squared in gravity.
Let me ask you again. Does mass determine acceleration, or does acceleration determine mass? This is an extremely important question. because it reveals the origin of material energy. The meaning behind the equation E equals mc squared. From the perspective of classical mechanics, it is believed that mass determines acceleration. That's because classical physics treats mass as an intrinsic value, inherent to matter. But from my point of view, in the quantum world, mass is not an inherent property like weight. In the quantum realm, mass is a reactive value that appears when something accelerates. From the viewpoint that matter is formed by vibrating string combinations, it follows that for these materials to move, whether simultaneously or sequentially, they must transmit vibration to the empty strings ahead of them. And when that happens, the transmission time of vibration will clearly differ. Depending on the vibration frequency of each string, that transmission time, that delay, is what we call mass. This is the reason why the proportional formula E equals mc squared holds true. To put it differently, the difference in vibration transmission speed caused by the difference in frequencies manifests as a difference in mass. Moreover, the total frequency of a material causes distortion in the adjacent digital points around it. The force that tries to flow into this distortion is what we call gravity, and that force creates gravitational acceleration. This is why mass produces weight. And this connection forms the relationship between mass, gravitational acceleration, and weight. The distortion propagates to the next adjacent digital point. So if we call the initial distortion x, then the next point receives 99% of x, and the following point receives 99% of that, forming a diminishing exponential chain. As the distance increases, the distortion approaches zero, resulting in a zero gravity state. However, this zero is not truly zero. The total vector sum of all such distortions acts like invisible strings between stars. And this is what produces gravitational interaction between celestial bodies. Additionally, whenever an object moves, the change in distortion is transmitted at the speed of light.
7. What is the mass of light, and why is the speed of light always constant?
So then, what is the mass of light? Modern physicists say that the mass of light is zero. That means light reaches its full speed, the speed of light, the moment it starts moving. I agree with this in principle. However, whether in digital or analog space, it is logically impossible for something to go from 0 to 1 without any time passing. There must have been a force that acted on it to cause the movement, and there must be a response time, a transition time from 0 to 1. Therefore, to say that light has exactly zero mass does not make logical sense. Movement is change, and change always requires time. That change in time is what we call acceleration. Even light requires this time, however, short in order to move, and that is what constitutes the mass of light. In a three-dimensional digital space, the smallest unit is an infinitesimal digital unit vibrating string. In my view, it may be possible to estimate the size of a digital unit by analyzing Planck's constant and the distance between layers in electron jumps. Now, the reason the speed of light is constant is that light travels at the fastest possible speed in three-dimensional space. In other words, the speed of light cannot be increased or decreased. That's why no matter what physical velocity is added to it, the speed of light does not change.
8. About the new type of flying vehicle UFO we need to develop.
You might be wondering why bring up UFOs in a physics discussion, but this is not clickbait to draw in viewers. I'm not a professional YouTuber. This topic came to me naturally as I was researching quantum mechanics. It's clear to everyone that the flight patterns of UFOs, as described in reports in sci-fi media, are very different from the aircraft we currently use, which rely on fluid dynamics. One obvious issue with modern aircraft is that they require runways, produce noise, and suffer from sonic booms and violent re-entry forces, all of which impose strict limitations. And even if we were to overcome all of these issues and develop a silent, shock-free propulsion system, enabling hovering, instant acceleration, instant stops, and sharp turns, such a craft would still be fundamentally different from the UFOs we've heard about, because that vehicle would still be a flying steel can carrying an egg inside. No matter how incredible the propulsion system is, such extreme movements would create unbearable G-forces, making it unsuitable for human travel. So the key challenge is not just levitation or propulsion. The difference between today's aircraft and the UFOs we've heard about is not simply about engines. To conceptualize this kind of flight, we need a complete understanding of the quantum world. But any further discussion on this would go beyond the scope of this video, so I'll stop here. For reference, the Wright brothers' first flight lasted 12 seconds and covered 37 meters. And look at what planes are capable of now. The hardest part is always getting started. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Please understand that the nature of YouTube makes it hard to include every detailed explanation. I truly hope this gave you inspiration for your own imagination in physics.
Health is more important than money. I wish peace and good health to you and your family. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. I'll reply sincerely.